Data integrity and security, and we are covering chapter number 1. It's called database security. Database security objectives, and then in that we have security measures: keep information private from outside viewing, maintain consistency of data, ensure resources remains at a high degree of availability. Now, there are some important words in this one which you must keep an eye on. We discussed consistency of data, and we discussed about that the data which is saved on the database must reach the database in a consistent manner. We talked about the ASCII character set of the data which is being saved or sent from the application to the database. It happens if you are using any other language other than English. You'll have to write the code in a way that the Arabic text, for example, if it's entered in a form, it is saved in the database in a proper Arabic format so that it's readable. Otherwise, it's a garbage data. You might have read of garbage in, garbage out. So there is a practice of testing the applications or the data when it's saved to the database. Then ensures the resources remain at high degree of availability. And that's what our next slide would be talking about: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, CIA. That's a format or a plan. Whenever we talk about data integrity, we have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Availability means that if you want to access the information, it should be available at that time. It should not be the case that you are trying to fetch some information about the customers and it's not there. That's why in most of the organizations and even huge companies where they are talking about data warehousing and data mining, they are collecting all information, even to the minutest details of the customers, and then they perform certain operations on them. Because each and every bit of information is important. They try to understand the trends of the public, how they are buying this stuff, how they are reacting to things, what are the insurance policies, what people are mostly interested in, and all those things. And that's only possible if all that data is stored and available upon request. Now, the huge databases won't maintain the data in the front. For example, there would be a front end of the database or the live data which would be there, which you are using. But the data which has been archived, which you are not using on regular basis, would be stored somewhere else. So that the hard drives which are storing your data on a database, they are performing at an optimal performance. The data which is not being used, which you use it for statistical analysis, would be on the other hard drives or the databases which are not used that much. In a normal office environment, I told you that the storage medium that we use, it has SSDs and it has fast SSDs. Of course, the data which is frequently accessed is usually stored on fast SSDs. Key to achieving effective data security architecture is organization must maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and it goes in a loop. Confidentiality of the information should be there, integrity of the information should be there, and then the availability of it should be there. That's why we call it CIA triage. Now, confidentiality requirements are ensure information remains private by limiting authorized access to the resources. Only guys who must see that information must have access to those resources. Now, we call it authorization sprawl as well in a normal IT environment. A person was working in the registration office, for example. Then he was shifted from registration office to student affairs. So he had some permissions in registration office. Now, once he's shifted from registration office to student affairs, again, he was granted certain permissions on it. When from there he moves to technical affairs, again, there would be certain permissions assigned. So there is usually a department who keeps an eye of the movement of departments and then taking those permissions back, because now if he's not working in student affairs or registration office, he must not have access to those resources. And that's the biggest problem, because if we don't remove those permissions from there and a person leaves and we fail to delete their accounts from there, remotely they can sit and launch any kind of attack to your resources. If a person leaves with a bad mood and his account is not suspended, he can just park his car next to the building, can access the Wi-Fi and do whatever they want to do on the Wi-Fi networks. Who will be responsible for that? It's not that person. It's the guys in your IT infrastructure who must have removed it. So that's why there are checklists. If a person comes in and leaves, there is a checklist that you must follow, that you are giving him certain permissions. So if he is leaving, you take all those permissions back. Now, block unauthorized access to resources, confidentiality protected using authentication, and access controls. Now, access controls could be physical and access controls could be logical. Logical in terms of access cards, biometrics, stuff like that. And if you have any cards in person that you are using just to swipe in order to get access to it, or the keys that you have for certain protected areas in your organization. State and federal laws may apply to these measures. Breaches in confidentiality can result in stolen identity, exposed business trade secrets. You might have seen in some of the companies, for example, if you were working with DHL, and if you resign from DHL, in some countries you're not allowed to work with Aramex or any other competitor. You'll have to choose a different line of business because they think that it's a conflict of interest. Maybe our secrets would be transferred to the other company. Integrity is reliable, accurate, and consistent data stored in the retrieved form from the database. Stored in and retrieved from the database, protected by preventing accidental and deliberate modifications. Most difficult item to measure. Now, these three lines are very important when you are working in a productive environment. Whenever we talk about a database, whenever we talk about the data on it, there are always multiple instances of a data, which is constantly replicated on each other. One will be a production database, the other one would be a copy of the same database. It would have constantly a copy of the actual data which is being saved. Now they are doing it because a database administrator might make a mistake in running a query. You know that you write a query and then you execute it on SQL. That might include adding tables, dropping tables, defining the relationships, then you have the attributes of the tables, you have its permissions, lots of things. So if you are executing any query, rather than executing it on the live data, it's always recommended to execute it on the test database that you have, which have exactly the same data that you have in the main table. So you can execute it, check its after effects, make sure that the information is fine and it's working as intended, rather than rolling back everything, because the things which are there on the test database can be reversed, but the transactions which are there on the actual database cannot be reversed. Most difficult item to measure, auditing used to compare the data with older backed up version of the data, result of the integrity breaches, unreliable data, flawed programs, and system failures. So, if there is a flawed program, which we were discussing in the morning, that you are not encrypting the configuration files, or a system failure, it should not affect the data which is saved on your database. Now, There is a common practice or a common complaint from the programmers that my application is working perfectly fine. I don't know why whenever I save something on the database, it gets corrupted. So it's not my application fault, it's the server fault. So easy to say, just to push the blame on someone else. If servers were that dumb, we cannot operate in a business environment at all. Always, whenever an application is written, you must make sure that the data which is going in the database and the information which is provided in terms of the forms or uploaded in the system remains there over a period of time and the data does not get corrupted. We have seen it that an application was there where people were uploading PDF documents. And after a semester, if you'll check it, most of the PDF documents, you'll find them corrupted. In some cases, you can recover the PDF documents. In some cases, if the people don't have the actual PDF documents, they cannot be recovered. There could be a number of reasons for that. But mostly it happens due to the malpractices. By the end of the semester, we'll be covering some problems which are associated with the poor programming practices and how it harms the data when it's saved on the databases. Availability is maintaining the accessible network or database resources. Business cannot operate without it. If the resources are not available, if your network links are broken, if you cannot reach the database, there is nothing much you can do. Must identify potential threats to availability, assess the threat level, plan appropriate intervention. Example of threat: technical failures, natural disasters, intrusions, user-caused harm. Anything can happen. Technical failures could be there, a server crashed, or a faulty hard drive. Natural disasters, earthquakes, or a short circuit in an organization. Intrusions, penetrations, anywhere from outside. Systems are compromised. Or user-caused harm. Maybe someone did it deliberately. If you see all these options, what they are talking about, isn't it a good practice to have everything in the cloud? Because it's off premises. It's not in the same geographical location even, because a data is copied over here at the primary location and the same set of data is copied somewhere else offshore. Now, whenever you're signing up on Amazon.com, it gives you 2 points which you must select from there. First of all, if you want to select the main data center, which would be where you'll be saving your data, you'll save it in the same geographical region. And there are tools with the help of that. If you'll ping it, it would show you the response time between that server and your location, and you'll check it the lowest response time. It means that if your things are hosted at that location, you'll get an excellent response from there. The second region that you'll select, it would be entirely up to you, where you want to save a second backup of it. So if there is a power failure or an internet access problem or anything like that, at least your things would be saved offshore. Who are we securing ourselves against? Very important point. To know that why we are doing all those things. Must understand what poses a threat. What kind of threat could be there? Now, it's not like one person would be sitting and it would be deciding. Usually there is a team who sits together and they try to assess all possible threats that could be there. And you list them all on a piece of paper with the higher management, and then they'll make the decisions on it. So for every point, for example, as we saw it in the previous slide, For example, natural disaster is there. There should be a plan for it. That if it would happen, what would you do? The first line of action would be this. Second would be this. Third would be this. But then they'll be focusing that if we'll be following all those procedures, how much delay would it be there in our services? And time is critical in that case. So you'll calculate the time response and everything in order to be back into business. If there is intrusion, what you would do. If there is a user-caused harm, how you'll restore the services. More threats exist on the inside of a network than the outside. It's always the case, whether it's hacking, whether it's intrusion, or any kind of problems, the people inside the organization usually are the cause more than from the outside. Overly restrictive databases are as ineffective as those that give too much access. Healthy balance is needed. Why are we saying that? We are saying that because if you'll put way too many checks on each and everything, it would make your own life miserable. For everything to give access. Now, you know, we talked about when we were discussing about firewalls, that default behavior of a firewall is deny. So any rule which is not defined in the system is denied. Same goes for the databases. You'll give an access, but for the critical data which is there in the systems, you'll define a balance that which information must be requested or they must ask permissions for, and which things should be open for everyone. If someone wants to get some information about the regular customers, their basic sales data and stuff like that, you don't need to get the authority level or a permission from the higher management. That information must be available to you. But if you want to close it, and for every time, if they want to get the annual report or the monthly report of it, they are asking you for all those things, you are making your own life miserable. Now, hackers. Now they are defining different things, or the threats that you have and the threats you are securing against what kind of threat. First of all, the threat that you have is from the hackers. Anyone who can hack into the system, SQL injections, etc., who will try to gain access to your database from the command prompt, from the login screen, through which it would be authenticated on the SQL server or Oracle or MySQL, and all data and the information in your tables would be exposed to those guys. You want to protect that. Person who can master firmware and software of the modern computer systems. Person who enjoy exploring and analysis of the network security without intent to cause harm. Not necessarily. They could cause harm as well. Otherwise, why would you look into it? You are looking into it because you are trying to find some weaknesses in the system. A cracker is a person who breaks into a network to destroy or steal information. A cracker is always there to crack something or to find a weakness and exploit it. Now in this one, as you know, we have covered it in network security and penetration testing. These are the different things like white hat hackers, gray hat hackers, black hat hackers, hacktivists, and script kiddies. Just to be in brief, white hat hackers are ethical hackers, a hacker that uses extensive experience and knowledge to test a system. Gray hat, an individual or a group individual that waver between the classification of a hacker and a cracker. It could be a good guy, it could be a bad guy. Whereas a black hat hacker, someone who breaks into computer networks without authorization, with a malicious intent, and they cause harm to the systems. Then we have hacktivists, refer to the hackers and crackers, who use their extensive experience and skills to use network to share their ideologies regarding controversial social, political, and economical games. So they are funded by states or groups to cause a harm. Then we have script kiddies, who refer to an amateur cracker that uses programming scripts in order to penetrate in your machines and systems. Now, if we see, as we covered in the morning as well, that social engineering is important whenever anyone tries to gain any information about your infrastructure. People who manipulate others to gain access to the systems, unauthorized area confidential information, often build trust with authorized users. That, okay, we are friends, we can share some resources, you can add me on your Facebook, we'll be sharing this stuff. From your Facebook, he'll be finding about your likes, your dislikes, the pages you have liked, the content you're sharing, and all that sort of stuff. Use deception and tricky to convince people to break normal security policies. That I have been doing it for quite some time, it doesn't harm you. I'm doing it, you get benefit from it as well. Example, asking for a password. And you're telling them that what kind of a password do you usually keep? And do you know that passwords are being cracked easily on the internet because people are using their own personal names or their date of birth and stuff like that? By the way, what kind of password are you keeping? So the other person would respond. Then they tell them that, okay, in order to keep your password secure, just change the password to this or something similar to this. You never know if the person who's suggesting you all that and offering you a computer on which they can change their password, if that computer has been compromised, having a keylogger or anything like that, where they'll note down all the details. Or maybe wherever he's sitting, there is a camera right on top of it. And you know that the person is a bit slow in entering the password and stuff, and you'll get it from there and will try to access. That's why in most of the applications, from Facebook to Twitter to Instagram and lots of other services, they are keeping track of your last login. So if you logged in from USA, you cannot log in from Germany in just 10 or 15 minutes. So they know that the password has been compromised or someone else is using it. But a little bit of relaxation is there, where they'll have to find that if you are using VPN or there is a different computer with a different MAC address. That's why when you are using a VPN and still if you are using Gmail, it does not ask you to re-authenticate yourself, because they have the details of your computers, that it's the same computer being used from a different country. Possibly you are using a VPN, but since the machine is the same, so it's perfectly fine. Now, breaking into the computers by asking the passwords. Now, computer users, network users causes over half of the security breaches. Major contributing factors are lack of education or disregarding a policy. If you'll ask a person, he'll say, oh, I wasn't aware of it. And even if you'll tell them that that's the policy, you must not be sharing your passwords or you must not be writing your password anywhere else, they'll say, I don't care. I don't have anything important on my machine, so why should I care? So you're not taking care of yourself. Maybe you're not serious about the security and privacy of your computer, but that same security and privacy of your computer can compromise the entire network. Just like a person came in, I told you, and he was saying that I lost my bank, my ATM card. I said, no, nothing to worry about. You can just call the bank and ask them to suspend your card. I was saying, no, the problem is that I wrote the PIN number on the card itself, because there is a place where you sign on the card. So he had a habit of forgetting the PIN number. So instead of signing over there, he wrote a PIN number. So people do all sort of mistakes. And of course, if someone would get it, the first thing they would do is they'll enter those 4 digits. And in a single swipe, depends what's the limit. Examples of most common user errors are poor habits, computer unlocked or unattended. We see it with the students. Working on an assignment, teacher, I'm coming back in 10 minutes. And they never show up. Left the computer like that, assignment open, email open, no issues. Happens in the office environment as well. Password errors, writing passwords on sticky notes. In the office, right in front of you, or right in front of them, you'll find lots of sticky notes with password of each website. For example, gmail.com, username and password. So anyone who would enter the office can easily read and use those username and passwords. Disregard the company policy by downloading the unauthorized software, because there would be a techie guy inside the office who would love to try lots of other applications. So they'll keep on downloading the applications from pirated websites. And you know, when you are downloading these pirated softwares, first of all, it's illegal. You are not allowed to download anything which you have not purchased and install it on your computer. Second thing is, most of these softwares which are cracked, they are cracked by the companies or the groups who are hackers or crackers. So they unpack the setup file, they crack it, and then they pack it again. So once you install it, maybe it would show as registered, but it would install something else as well on your computer. Through that, your computer can be controlled by those users remotely. Now, opening unknown emails and attachments, as we covered, that you must check that what attachments are there. Inappropriate disclosure, giving information over the telephone, or social engineering. Someone is asking you confidential information about the organization, about the kind of systems you are using, and these guys end up providing all those details over telephone. Procrastination, failing to report computer issues in a timely manner. If something happened, you're afraid that if I'll inform the higher management, maybe they'll think bad about me. So if something happened, they just try to hide it. Just like if you used a USB at home and your home computer was infected. You connected the same USB at work PC, and the virus got transferred from the same USB to your computer. And you know that there were some files which are not there. You simply remain silent and don't inform the IT department that they need to scan your computer before it travels over to the network. Now, computer literate users may take risk and find shortcuts to security measures. That, okay, there is a restriction on my computer that I cannot do certain things. I'm very smart. I can find some shortcuts how to bypass this security measure. Now, those security policies are there to protect the assets of the organization, but not to make fun of them. Disgruntled employees on a network access rights and destroy files. They can abuse the files, they can change the access rights, and they can destroy the files as well. Now, that's the main purpose of a network and a database administrator, not often views as threat to the network they run. Room for error always exists. There could be some new way to penetrate on the computers or systems. So it's their responsibility to keep themselves updated always, whatever they are doing. Their mistakes have consequences for integrity, availability, and reliability of the network. Because you are the guys who are responsible for the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And if you'll make a mistake, of course, you are working on systems which are critical, and it would affect the organization or the business in general. Dynamic nature of the data environment can cause new security flaws to be created. Network components must be regularly audited, and common mistake is not removing the user rights and account credentials as discussed earlier. In the internet, 2 billion internet users are there, which might have grown to 4 million by now, since the statistics are quite old over here. More than 100 million websites, 75% of the US residents have access to the internet. Online education, social networking, things are increasing. Threats on the internet are on the rise, and then more than 600,000 viruses, etc., are there on the network. Now, social interactions contribute to the growing number of identity thefts, because nowadays we have lots of social media apps through which we share lots of content. The content that we share through Facebook, the content that we share on Instagram, Twitter, and all those applications, there are tools with the help of which these applications can be compromised. Just like you might have seen a latest release of the WhatsApp application to be compromised. That's why it's recommended to have a 6-digit PIN code on your WhatsApp, so that no one else is gaining access to your contacts and communications and whatever you have on WhatsApp. Otherwise, we have seen that a WhatsApp account was used by sending messages to the contacts on your contact list requesting for money. Because in some countries, you can send and receive money through WhatsApp itself. Now, website page code poses a threat to inform the browser how to display the content, to inform the browser how to react to the user response. Now, that's called cross-site scripting, XSS. If the code of the website is compromised, your data could be leaked from there. Maybe you'll visit a website. By visiting it, it would copy the username and password stored on your browser. That's why there is a new university policy that they are switching off the option where you can save the username and password on the browsers. Because if it's compromised, the same information can be leaked out. Hijacking web pages rewritten to distribute malicious code or redirect the user to an attacker website. You'll go to a website, and in that website, as soon as it would load, there would be a JavaScript executed. It would show you a pop-up that your system is infected with virus, click here to clean. And most of the times people panic. They click on it and they would take them to a lookalike website which would be similar to their website with the logo and everything. And they think that it's scanning the website. It's not scanning the website, it's collecting all that relevant information from the website. Now, malware is a malicious code or a software written and used by unauthorized intruders, often intended to be harmful and destructive. So they are collecting, they are sending all those malwares to the computers to infect them. Now, spoofing is fraudulent websites make a lookalike identical to the legitimate website. The objective is to draw a user to gather the information, username and passwords. Can easily be registering a domain name that is a lookalike, a main website with some typos. Just like they are giving an example, Google, G-O-G-L-E, or Hotmail with a different spellings. Web browser applications that interact client machines to the internet responsible for sending and receiving the web pages. Now, web pages has a built-in programming language that can be manipulated. For example, the browsers are made to execute the files as JavaScript, HTML pages, ASP, ASP.NET, PHP, C#. As soon as it would show a page like that, of course, it would process it automatically. But if you are using some wrong practices in writing a code and stuff like that, it would be automatically executed on the browser. Now, SQL injection intruder appends the malicious code onto a database directed URL. It would be an address through which you'll go to the login page of a database, and it would gain access to the admin credentials of SQL Server. Intended to manipulate the database into sending the confidential information. HTTP portion of the web address informs the browser of the protocol used by sending the request to the website. Now we know that if we are sending an address as HTTP, it's a normal traffic which is flowing between the website or your computer and the web server. But if it's HTTPS, it's a secure traffic which is going on the website, and it's at least tunneled between you and the web server. So there are less chances that your data or the communication between you and the web server is compromised. Now, domain name system, which is or domain name servers, database of domain names and their respective IP addresses. It maintains the name to IP and IP to name. Then DNS poisoning is cracking gains control over DNS server, where we discussed it in the previous semester as well, that your DNS server would be compromised, and the information, for example, if you want to go to google.com, there will be an IP address. So if there is a DNS poisoning, they'll change the IP address behind the Google address, and instead of going to Google, you'll be going to a lookalike website which would be launched by the attacker itself. User may be fooled into providing a personally identifiable information. Now, these are the characteristics for an illegal and moral suspect, and then the social sites, news groups, and the technical forums. Now, misleading applications, that's what we'll be covering in next lecture. This is